Once all was said and done, Taryn managed to acquire data on about 80 children, and it went something like this. 52 possessed battle eco. 25 possessed elemental eco. Of those that did, the overwhelming majority had an affinity for fire, 10 had an affinity for wind, while only 2 children had an affinity for thunder. 15 children possessed wild eco, and only 8 children of the Yukata clan would go on to wield shaper eco and become forgers. With the ceremony coming to an end, Taryn quickly gathered up his things and made to leave the training field. He only made it a few steps before someone laid a hand on his shoulder and turned him around, causing him to drop his bag in the process. Yukata Tengdi looked down his nose at Taryn, all semblance of the kindness he'd shown on the field gone, replaced by anger and disappointment.
"Why are you here?"
Tengdi's words were barely above a whisper, but they shook Taryn to his core as if he'd shouted them. In all his life, he'd only seen the First Elder a handful of times, and never had he been this close. I was just... Taryn stammered.
"Spying?"
Tengdi narrowed his eyes. It was then that Taryn realized his bag had fallen open and his journal was visible. Tengdi pushed Taryn aside, much to the boy's protest, and picked up the leather-bound journal. With one hand, Tengdi undid the clasp and flipped the book open while holding a struggling Taryn at bay with his other hand. After a few seconds of flipping through the pages, Tengdi latched onto Taryn's vest and he lifted Taryn off of his feet. He looked at the journal for a few moments more. Then he shut the book and shifted his eyes to Taryn's face.
"As a favor to your grandmother, I will not kill you for the crime you have committed here today. However, and listen to me well, boy, you will never cultivate eco, especially not at our expense. If I ever see you in this part of the city again, I'll see you expelled from the city."
He released Taryn's vest, allowing the boy to collapse onto his backside. While maintaining eye contact with Taryn, Tengdi ripped every last page out of the journal, then threw the leather cover. It flew like a disc over the top of a nearby tree before vanishing into the tree line.
"Go home. A nameless Clanless like yourself doesn't belong here. You aren't even worthy enough to look in our direction."
Taryn flinched at Tengdi's words. His eyes involuntarily looked towards the tree line. He didn't care much about the paper. It was easily replaced. But he wouldn't leave the cover. His grandmother had saved every tiana she could get her hands on for 3 months to buy him that cover, and he wasn't about to lose it. But he knew he couldn't go for it now, not with Tengdi watching. So Taryn stood up and fled from Tengdi's sight, vowing to himself that not only would he return for the cover, but he would show Tengdi that he was wrong. Taryn would cultivate, and he would be damn good at it, too. He wasn't the worthless kid people said he was. He wasn't, and he'd prove it to Tengdi, to the Yukata clan, to everyone.